My 17th year at Northwood High was already halfway through when Vanya Kova, previously the vibrant center of our social orbit, re-entered the hallways after a 4-month absence. An immediate hush fell over the entire student body as her figure appeared in the doorway of our homeroom. Look, it's the girl who ruined her life, and is now a mother at 18. A loud voice boomed, shattering the tense quiet. The classroom erupted in a cacophony of cruel laughter. Later that day, she sat utterly alone at a far table in the bustling cafeteria, a half-eaten sandwich before her, while hushed, cruel whispers swirled around her like a physical storm. I began to make my way toward her, intending to join her, but my friend's hand clamped down on my arm. She thrust a crumpled paper into my hand. Don't waste your pity. She earned this. She ensnared Julian, trapping him into fatherhood. Now, his scholarship dreams are gone, replaced by sleepless nights and changing nappies. For the subsequent weeks, I observed Vanya. Her daily life at school became an open torment. Teachers, who had once praised her keen intellect and gentle disposition, now regarded her with thinly veiled disdain, as if she personified everything wrong with contemporary youth. They responded to her inquiries with cutting sarcasm, treated her like an unwelcome intruder, and during a mandatory class on personal safety and boundaries, the instructor giving the presentation maintained an unnerving, direct gaze at Vanya throughout the entire session. The students were no better. Girls who had once mimicked her fashion whispered harsh slurs as she passed. Her former circle of friends had exiled her instantly. She had deactivated all her online presence within 2 weeks. Yet, through all this relentless hostility, I noticed something profound about Vanya. She never allowed the constant barrage of cruelty to sour her spirit. I frequently saw her staying after classes, patiently tutoring students with learning differences. I witnessed her discreetly slip lunch money to a freshman who had forgotten his. She always carried sanitary products in her backpack, readily available for any girl in need. No one ever offered a word of thanks. They simply took what they required and resumed their pretense that she didn't exist. Everything shifted the day I decided to bypass 5th period. My mother's latest spiral had left me shaken and struggling to breathe. So I sought refuge in the abandoned greenhouse behind the sports complex, a forgotten corner free from the school's pervasive camera gaze, where I could simply compose myself. I was only partially settled when I heard approaching footsteps. Marcus Prescott, our geometry instructor, appeared around the corner. Everyone admired him. Girls would subtly giggle when he told jokes in class. A tough afternoon, isn't it? His voice a low, comforting rumble as he approached me. Realizing I'd been discovered, I met his gaze and pleaded with him not to report me. I won't, he responded. I've observed you seem quite tense lately. I could help you find some calm. Before I could fully process his words, he had me pressed against the damp, cold wall of the greenhouse. His hand began to trail slowly down my arm, and I felt myself completely immobilized, my breath caught in my throat. Allow me to soothe your worries, he murmured, his breath too close. Step away, now. Vanya's voice, though sharp with fury, had a tremor of fear, as she appeared from behind the overgrown bushes, a small can of defense spray leveled directly at his face. Her hand was steady, unmoving. Marcus Prescott stumbled backward, attempting to feign innocence. I was simply offering guidance to a distressed student. You've completely misconstrued the situation. I witnessed it all. Get out, immediately. The steel in her tone brokered no argument. He grumbled something about our presence being unauthorized and quickly retreated into the shadows. I stared at Vanya, my eyes brimming with overwhelming gratitude. She confessed she had come out for a moment of quiet reflection herself. She wasn't a hero, she claimed, just in the right place, at the right time. Vanya led me directly to Director Hawthorne's office. She demanded immediate action be taken regarding Marcus Prescott. But Director Hawthorne barely looked up from the stack of papers on his desk. Mr. Prescott has taught here for 15 years without a single complaint. Are you certain you didn't misinterpret what you observed? He had her trapped against a wall, his hands on her, Vanya insisted. Hawthorne finally turned to me. Is that precisely what transpired? Sometimes, when we are feeling vulnerable, our perception of events can be skewed. Then he fixed his gaze on Vanya, his voice laced with even greater condescension. Considering your current circumstances, I understand you might be inclined to perceive difficulties where none exist. Perhaps, if you wish to avoid drama, you should have considered that when you were 16. Vanya's face flushed crimson, her eyes welling with tears, and she abruptly exited the office. Too timid or too stunned to speak, I followed her. I desperately wanted to talk to her right then, but she had already disappeared. I didn't see her for the next 2 days, but upon her return, the most horrific thing imaginable befell her. I was in algebra class when one of the boys who routinely made vulgar jokes about Vanya beckoned me over, brandishing his phone. I hesitated initially, but his persistence, coupled with the urging of several friends, eventually wore me down. He opened our year group's restricted social media gossip account and, laughing heartily, told me to take a look. My stomach plummeted. There was a post featuring Vanya, but it wasn't truly her. They were digitally manipulated, explicit images with her face superimposed. I felt a wave of nausea. Quite amusing, wouldn't you agree? He chuckled, turning to his friends behind him. I think they assumed I shared their twisted humor. I merely nodded, my face blank, and left the room. I had seen Vanya earlier that morning. So I immediately set out to find her and discovered her in that quiet spot behind the sports complex. She was huddled on the ground, weeping uncontrollably. I didn't utter a word. I simply sat beside her, and offered silent comfort. After 10 agonizing minutes of wrenching sobs, she turned to me and whispered, "You're the only friend I have left." Then she lunged forward, embracing me tightly. "You deserve to know the truth," she mumbled, her face pressed against my chest. "Julian isn't the father of my baby. He abandoned me the moment I discovered I was expecting." I was utterly stunned. "Then who is the father?" I asked hesitantly. "Marcus Prescott," she managed to say, before dissolving into another flood of tears. My heart sank. That was the very teacher she had just prevented from assaulting me. I held Vanya as she wept, my mind racing. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The way Prescott had cornered me, his unnerving self-assurance. He had done this before. Vanya confided that it had begun last year when she was struggling in his class. He had offered additional tutoring sessions after school. At first, it seemed entirely normal. Then, he started making subtle comments about her maturity for her age, how uniquely special she was. She lamented that she should have known better, but she was only 15, and his attention had made her feel important. One afternoon, he kept her after their tutoring session. And that's when it happened. She had never told anyone. Who would possibly believe her? The school's most beloved teacher versus a popular girl everyone already assumed was self-centered. I asked her why she had returned to school if everyone treated her so cruelly. She wiped her eyes and said she couldn't allow him to win. She had to graduate. She had to demonstrate to her child that one does not surrender when life becomes arduous. But now, with these fabricated images, she wasn't sure if she could endure it any longer. I told her we had to act. We couldn't let Prescott evade consequences for this. She laughed bitterly, reminding me of our futile attempt at Director Hawthorne's office. No one would listen to us. I insisted. Perhaps not alone, but together we can devise a solution. She looked at me as if I were insane, but I detected a tiny flicker of hope in her eyes. We remained there for another 20 minutes, simply talking. She confided in me about her parents, their profound disappointment, how they relentlessly pressed her for the father's identity, but she couldn't reveal the truth. They would never believe Prescott capable of such an act. Her father coached the junior varsity basketball team, and Prescott occasionally assisted. They were friends. Her mother volunteered at school events and perpetually spoke of what an exceptional educator Prescott was. Vanya said telling them would shatter everything. I understood perfectly. My own mother wouldn't believe me about anything on a good day. On a bad day, she'd likely blame me for it. The bell rang, signaling our return to class. Vanya asked if I would join her for lunch the following day. I agreed immediately. She smiled for the first time since I had found her weeping. It was small, but genuine. We walked back into the school building together, and I could feel the stares. Someone made a crude comment about me being the next to become pregnant if I associated with Vanya. I ignored them. Vanya held her head high, as she always did. I marveled at where she found such resilience. That night, sleep eluded me. My thoughts constantly revolved around Prescott. How many other girls he might have harmed? How he continued to teach, to coach, to be everyone's favorite educator while Vanya was treated like refuse. I grabbed my laptop and began searching. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for. Perhaps other complaints, or something that might assist us. I located the school's official website and Prescott's biography page. Teacher of the Year 3 times, coached the mathletes to state championships, volunteer work with at-risk youth. It sickened me. Everything about him appeared flawless on paper. No wonder no one would credit Vanya's account. I continued digging, examining old yearbooks online, searching for any recurring pattern, any indication that someone else had noticed something amiss. But there was nothing. Only smiling photographs of Prescott surrounded by grateful students and beaming parents. The following morning, I met Vanya at her locker before first period. She appeared utterly exhausted, yet resolute. Dark circles beneath her eyes that her concealer couldn't entirely obscure. I told her I'd been contemplating all night, and we needed to approach this strategically. She nodded, confirming she, too, had been thinking, barely sleeping between her baby's feedings and the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. We couldn't pursue official channels since no one would heed us. We had to discover an alternative approach. I proposed we start by ascertaining if Prescott had done this to anyone else. Vanya's expression darkened. She admitted she'd pondered the same question for months, particularly during those long sleepless nights. We decided to divide our efforts and subtly inquire, not directly, but through casual conversations, to see if anyone else had experienced peculiar interactions with Prescott. Vanya would speak to girls in her grade who had taken his geometry class. I would check with sophomores currently enrolled in his courses. We agreed to reconvene at lunch and compare our findings. The morning dragged by at an agonizingly slow pace. In English class, I sat beside Serafina Meadows, who had Prescott third period. I inquired about her geometry class, striving to maintain a light, conversational tone. She shrugged and said it was fine. I pressed a little, asking if Prescott was truly as exceptional as everyone claimed. She acquired this odd expression, her pencil pausing mid-sentence, and uttered, "Yes, he was quite helpful, if you required it." Then she turned away, becoming suddenly engrossed in her notes, and didn't speak to me for the remainder of the class. By lunchtime, I had engaged with 6 different girls. 3 gave me the same peculiar look Serafina had. Their faces became guarded the moment I uttered Prescott's name. One girl actually began to say something, then stopped abruptly, trailing off with, "Never mind." Vanya was already seated at our table in the far corner of the cafeteria, the one by the perpetually humming, broken water cooler. No one else would sit there anyway. She looked frustrated, picking at her sandwich without eating. She had encountered similar responses. Girls would start to articulate something, then change their minds. One junior named Lena Maxwell had actually teared up when Vanya mentioned Prescott's tutoring sessions. But when Vanya asked if she was all right, Lena practically fled, abandoning her lunch tray. We knew we were onto something, but no one would talk. I recalled a detail from a true crime podcast my mother listened to when she was sober enough to focus. Predators rarely had only one victim. They exhibited patterns, types, methods. Prescott seemed drawn to vulnerable girls. Girls who were struggling academically. Girls who appeared to need assistance. Girls who wouldn't be believed. Vanya fit the profile perfectly. Bright, seemingly confident, but grappling with math in a family that expected unwavering excellence. Her parents trusted Prescott implicitly. No one would believe her over him. I wondered how many others fit that same mold. How many girls had sat in his classroom feeling trapped? After school, Vanya had to collect her baby from her aunt's house. Her aunt had been caring for him during the day while Vanya was at school, being one of the few family members who hadn't completely disowned her. I offered to accompany her, but Vanya said her aunt already considered her a detrimental influence on me, believing that associating with a teen mother would also derail my future. Instead, I went to the library and retrieved yearbooks from the past 5 years. The librarian gave me a curious glance, but asked no questions. I began compiling a list of girls who had been in Prescott's geometry classes. Then, I cross-referenced those names with honor roll lists, specifically looking for students whose math grades had suddenly surged. It was tedious work, but I uncovered a consistent pattern. Each year, 2 or 3 girls consistently transitioned from C's or D's to A's in Prescott's class. Their grades in other subjects remained unchanged. Only their math scores showed a dramatic spike. I captured images of the relevant pages with my phone, ensuring clear shots of the names and grade progressions. Evidence. We desperately needed evidence. That night, Vanya sent me a text message. Her baby had been crying for hours, and she was utterly exhausted, but she thought of something significant. Prescott maintained a traditional paper gradebook in his desk, in addition to the digital system. She had seen it during one of their tutoring sessions. He'd made personal notes in it, not merely grades, but comments about specific students. She remembered seeing her own name with small stars next to it. At the time, she had interpreted it as a sign that he thought she was special, that she was finally excelling at something. Now, she wondered what those stars truly signified. The following day at school proved even more difficult. The digitally altered images were still circulating, despite the administration's purported zero-tolerance policy. Someone had printed them out and taped them inside Vanya's locker. She tore them down without a word, but I saw her hands trembling, saw the way she blinked back tears. In the hallway between classes, a group of boys made crude comments as we passed. One of them, Blair Larson, the arrogant quarterback who believed he was a divine gift, actually reached out as if to grab Vanya. I stepped between them and told him to back off. He laughed, remarking that I was quite protective of my new girlfriend. His friends found this hilarious, their laughter echoing off the lockers. Vanya pulled me away before I could respond. She insisted it wasn't worth it. They weren't worth it. Prescott walked by while we were at Vanya's locker. He slowed down and looked directly at us. Not at Vanya, but at me. His expression was affable, concerned, the perfect facade of a caring educator. He inquired if everything was all right, his voice gentle and paternal. I felt my skin crawl but forced myself to nod. He said if I ever needed to speak, his door was always open. Then he walked away, as if nothing untoward had transpired, his shoes clicking on the linoleum. Vanya's face was pale. She whispered that was precisely how it had begun with her. The feigned concern, the open door, the eagerness to help. I felt ill. At lunch, we formulated a plan. We needed to gain access to Prescott's classroom and locate that gradebook. Vanya mentioned she had assisted with the math department's inventory during summer school and still had access through the main department office. They never changed the locks, and she'd observed that teachers kept spare classroom keys in the supply closet. We would go after school when Prescott had basketball practice. He served as assistant coach and was invariably gone by 3:30 p.m., not returning until after 5 p.m. That window afforded us time to search. It was a perilous undertaking, but we had no other recourse. No one would speak to us. The administration wouldn't listen. We had to find the proof ourselves. The remainder of the day crept by at an agonizing pace. In geometry class, I observed Prescott teach as if nothing was amiss. He cracked jokes about parallel lines never meeting, much like some individuals in high school. Students laughed, girls smiled at him. He called on me once, and I managed to answer without my voice trembling. He offered a perfunctory, "Good job," and moved on. I wondered how he managed it, how he could harm Vanya, attempt to harm me, likely harm others, and still stand there, embodying the perfect teacher. The bell finally rang, and I met Vanya by the gym. We watched Prescott head to practice, laughing with some players about last week's game. The coast was clear. Vanya led me to the math department office. The door was unlocked. Teachers were constantly entering and exiting. She went directly to the supply closet and located the keyring bearing all the classroom spares. Prescott's room number was clearly labeled. My hands were sweating as we walked down the empty hallway. Prescott's classroom was at the very end, past the other math rooms and the small office where tutoring sessions occurred. The key worked flawlessly. Inside, the room appeared entirely normal. Inspirational math posters promoting perseverance, student work displayed on the walls. His desk was meticulously neat, organized, a coffee mug emblazoned with "World's Best Teacher" sitting beside a stack of papers. We began our search. Vanya tackled the desk drawers while I examined the filing cabinet. Nothing in the first drawer. The second drawer contained tests. The third held attendance sheets. The bottom drawer was locked. Vanya discovered a letter opener, and we managed to pry it open. Inside were 3 physical gradebooks, the current year's and those from the 2 preceding years. Vanya seized them, and we began flipping through the pages. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Grades, assignments, standard teacher records. Then Vanya located the pages marked with stars. 5 girls in the current book had stars beside their names. 3 were juniors, 2 sophomores. All had exhibited significant improvement in the second semester. The previous years revealed the same pattern. Stars beside certain names, always girls. Always students who had struggled and then suddenly excelled. Vanya recognized some of the names. Lena Maxwell was there with 3 stars. So was a girl named Nina Morgan, who had graduated last year. Another named Johanna Lowell, who had moved away junior year. I captured images of every page with stars, ensuring the names and markings were distinct. We had to move swiftly. Practice would conclude soon. As we replaced the books, a folded paper slipped out. Vanya snatched it. It was a note scrawled on the type of stationery young girls often used. The handwriting appeared youthful. Careful cursive. Mr. P. Thank you for yesterday. I won't tell anyone. Please don't fail me. There was no signature, but the paper looked aged, worn, as if he had retained it for a considerable time. Vanya's face went white. She whispered that she had written something strikingly similar. He had compelled her to write it, claiming it was to demonstrate her gratitude for the tutoring. Now she realized it was a form of insurance, designed to make it appear as though she was the one pursuing him. We heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart seized. We hastily shoved everything back into the drawer and locked it. The footsteps grew nearer, measured and deliberate. Vanya grabbed my hand and pulled me behind the door just as it swung open. Director Hawthorne entered. He surveyed the empty classroom, then proceeded to Prescott's desk. He opened the top drawer, extracted a folder, quickly reviewed its contents, replaced it, and departed. We waited 5 agonizing minutes before moving, barely breathing. My legs were trembling so violently, I could scarcely walk. Vanya looked on the verge of vomiting. We slipped out and locked the door behind us. Outside, we collapsed onto the bleachers, attempting to process what we had just witnessed. Hawthorne examining Prescott's desk. The stars, the note, the pattern spanning years. Vanya insisted we had to tell someone. But who? The principal was clearly implicated somehow. The school board? The police? Would they believe us? 2 teenage girls with phone pictures and a wild, improbable tale. I asserted we needed more. We needed one of those other girls to speak up, to corroborate Vanya's story. She agreed, but maintained none of them would. They were terrified, just as she had been. Still was terrified. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. My mother was passed out anyway, so she didn't notice. I kept thinking about those names, those stars. How many girls had Prescott harmed? How long had this been transpiring? I looked up some of the names on social media. Lena Maxwell had her profiles locked down tightly. Nina Morgan appeared to have vanished from social media entirely after graduation. Johanna Lowell's last posts were from 2 years ago, just before she moved. None of them seemed active anymore, much like Vanya had been forced to delete hers. Pattern after pattern. The following morning, Vanya texted that she was staying home. Her baby had a fever, and she couldn't leave him. I replied that I would continue digging on my own. At school, I felt exposed without her, as if Prescott would somehow discern what we had done, but he behaved normally in class. He lectured on angles and proofs. He told his jokes. I watched him more meticulously now, however, noticing how he invariably selected certain girls to assist. Quiet ones, ones who sat alone, ones who appeared tired or stressed. He had a specific type. Vanya had been an exception, popular, confident, at least outwardly, but she had been vulnerable in her own way, struggling with math in a family that expected unwavering perfection. At lunch, I sat alone at Vanya's usual table. Across the cafeteria, I spotted Lena Maxwell sitting with a few other quiet girls. I had seen her name in the gradebook, 3 stars beside it. She looked weary, thin, as if she wasn't eating enough. I walked over and asked if I could join them. The other girls looked confused, but Lena nodded. I engaged in small talk for a few minutes about classes and homework. Then, cautiously, I mentioned I was struggling in Prescott's class. Lena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I stated I was considering asking for tutoring, but felt unsure. Lena slowly put her fork down and said quietly that I should seek a different tutor. Perhaps a student peer or online assistance. Anything but staying after school with Prescott. The other girls looked uncomfortable. One swiftly changed the subject to the upcoming winter formal. But Lena continued to look at me. After lunch, she intercepted me in the hallway. She asked why I was truly inquiring about Prescott. I took a risk and confided in her about Vanya, about what Prescott had done to her. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She said she couldn't speak about it. She had worked so hard to obliterate the memory. Her parents had dismissed her as dramatic when she tried to tell them, insisting Prescott was a good man who had only helped her grades improve. Why was she being so ungrateful? She had transferred to online schooling for her senior year just to escape him. But the memories hadn't faded. I asked if she would be willing to assist Vanya, to speak up so people would believe us. Lena shook her head. She said she couldn't endure it again. The interrogations, the skepticism, the way people would scrutinize her. She had witnessed what they had done to Vanya, the digitally altered photos, the malicious rumors. She couldn't handle that. She was applying to universities. She needed recommendation letters. She couldn't risk this following her. I understood, but I was frustrated. How many girls would remain silent while Prescott continued teaching? Lena must have discerned my frustration because she offered a soft apology. Then she walked away. That afternoon, I had study hall in the library. I was researching whether we could anonymously report to someone outside the school system when Bronte Miller sat down across from me. She was in my English class, quiet, good grades, kept to herself. She inquired what I was working on. I replied, just research for a project. She nodded, then slid a folded paper across the table. She said Lena had told her I was asking about Prescott. Then she left before I could respond. I unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot of text messages. Prescott's number, asking a student to meet him after school for extra help. Then the messages grew increasingly strange, asking if she had confided in anyone about their sessions, telling her she was special, that he could help her with more than just math. My hands trembled as I read. This was proof. Actual, tangible proof. I texted Vanya immediately. She called me from her aunt's house. I told her about Lena, about Bronte, about the messages. She began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but of immense relief. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't alone. Other girls had endured this too. We agreed to meet tomorrow to strategize our next steps. We had evidence now. We had to be shrewd about how to utilize it. Prescott had been doing this for years. He was cunning, protected. We had to be even more cautious. That night, I made physical copies of everything. The photos from the gradebooks, the screenshot Bronte had provided. I emailed them to myself, to Vanya, and saved them on a flash drive. If anything happened to our phones, we would still possess the proof. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying images of Prescott in class tomorrow. Acting normal, perhaps selecting his next victim, perhaps already grooming someone new. The thought sickened me. We had to stop him. But we were just teenagers. He was a revered teacher. Who would listen to us? The next day, Vanya was back at school. Her baby was better, and her aunt could watch him. She looked exhausted, but determined. We met before first period to plan. We decided to try one more time with the administration. This time, we would present the evidence. The photos, the messages, everything. If Hawthorne wouldn't listen, we would escalate to the superintendent. If they wouldn't listen, we would approach the school board. Someone had to care that a teacher was preying on students. Someone had to stop him. We walked into the main office together. The secretary inquired if we had an appointment. We stated it was urgent. She rolled her eyes but summoned Hawthorne. He emerged looking annoyed, stating he had 5 minutes before a meeting. We followed him into his office. Vanya spoke first. She said we possessed evidence that Prescott was acting inappropriately with students. Hawthorne sighed and said, "We've addressed this matter before." That's when I produced the printed photos, the gradebook pages, the stars, the established pattern. Hawthorne barely glanced at them. He declared, "Significant improvement isn't evidence of anything except effective teaching." Then I presented him with Bronte's screenshot. His expression shifted. He studied it carefully, asking where we had obtained it. I replied, "A student provided it to us." Someone else Prescott had targeted. Hawthorne placed the paper down and looked at us. He said this was a grave accusation. If we were mistaken, we could irrevocably damage a man's career. Did we comprehend the gravity of that? Vanya retorted that Prescott had already ruined her life. She was 16 with a baby because a teacher she trusted had exploited her. How was his career more important than that? Hawthorne stated he would investigate the matter, instructing us to return to class and allow him to handle it. Something about his tone was off. Too calm, too dismissive. We left his office feeling defeated once more. Vanya predicted he wouldn't act. He would likely warn Prescott, and then things would only worsen for us. I concurred. We needed an alternative plan. As we walked to class, someone called Vanya's name. We turned to see Ms. Celeste, the AP biology teacher. She asked if we could speak after school, stating it was important. We agreed, confused. Mrs. Celeste had never paid attention to either of us before. She primarily taught seniors. We didn't have her for any classes, but something in her expression piqued our curiosity. The day passed slowly. Prescott seemed different in geometry, distracted. He kept checking his phone, stumbled over problems he typically solved with ease. At one point, he stared directly at me for an uncomfortably long time, as if attempting to decipher something. I maintained a neutral expression, but my heart was racing. Had Hawthorne informed him about our meeting? Did he know we had been in his classroom? After class, he requested I stay behind. My blood ran cold. I said I had to get to my next class. He insisted it would take only a minute. Other students were filing out. Soon, we would be alone. I grabbed my belongings and headed for the door. He called my name again, his voice taking on a sharper edge. He said we truly needed to discuss my grades, my potential, how he could help me succeed in his class. The words were innocent, but the tone was anything but. I practically ran out of the room. In the hallway, I texted Vanya. Prescott was onto us. We had to be cautious. She texted back that she had also gotten a strange vibe from him in the hall, as if he were watching her. We agreed to stick together for the remainder of the day. Safety in numbers. After school, we met Miss Celeste in her empty classroom. She closed the door and drew the blinds. That made me nervous, but Vanya seemed to trust her. Miss Celeste sat on a desk and regarded us for a long moment. Then, she asked if we were the ones asking questions about Prescott. We exchanged glances, but nodded. She said she had heard from Lena and Bronte that we were trying to take action. She wanted to help. Vanya asked why she cared. Miss Celeste explained she had observed patterns over the years. Girls who abruptly withdrew from activities, who transformed from outgoing to introverted, who improved drastically only in Prescott's class. She had attempted to speak to Hawthorne about it 2 years prior. He had shut her down immediately, telling her she was perceiving issues where none existed and threatening her job if she continued to spread rumors. So, she had remained silent, but continued to watch, continued to notice. I asked if she possessed any proof. She shook her head, only observations and suspicions, but she added that she knew other teachers who had noticed things too. Mr. Rojas in Spanish, Ms. Price in history. They had all attempted to speak up at different times. All had been silenced. Prescott was untouchable. He brought accolades to the school. Parents adored him. The school board considered him beyond reproach. Ms. Celeste said the only way to stop him was to go entirely outside the school system. Vanya asked what she meant. Ms. Celeste produced a business card. It was for a detective at the local police department, investigator Sonia Monroe. Ms. Celeste stated that she specialized in crimes against minors. She would take us seriously, but we needed to be prepared. Once we spoke to the police, everything would change. The school would close ranks. People would take sides. It would become ugly. Were we ready for that? I looked at Vanya. She was holding the card as if it might burn her. I knew she was contemplating her baby, her parents, how much worse things could become. But then, she straightened her shoulders and declared yes, she was ready. She couldn't allow Prescott to harm anyone else. Ms. Celeste said she would contact investigator Monroe and arrange a meeting. She instructed us to gather all our evidence, make copies of everything, and to be cautious. Prescott had powerful connections. The next 2 days were fraught with tension. Prescott watched us constantly in class, in the halls. Even at lunch, I would catch him staring from across the cafeteria. Other students began to notice too. Blair Larson made a crude joke about Prescott having an obsession with the teen mother and her friend. His buddies laughed, but it sent shivers down my spine. Vanya started having someone walk her to her car after school, usually me or one of the few girls who still conversed with her. Investigator Monroe agreed to meet us that Saturday at the police station. Ms. Celeste accompanied us for support. The station was smaller than I had anticipated, just a regular building downtown. Investigator Monroe was younger than I had imagined too, perhaps in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She led us to a private room and told us we could confide everything. No judgment, no rush, just the truth. Vanya began first. She recounted the entire story. The tutoring, the compliments, how Prescott had made her feel special. Then how things shifted. How he began touching her shoulders, her hands. How he would keep her after sessions. How one day he kissed her and she froze. How it escalated from there. How she was too terrified and bewildered to tell anyone. How when she became pregnant, he persuaded her to blame Julian, insisting no one would believe her anyway. A respected teacher versus a popular girl who would simply appear to be covering up promiscuity. Investigator Monroe took notes without interruption. When Vanya finished, I presented our evidence. The photos of the gradebooks, the stars beside names, Bronte's screenshot, the pattern extending back years. Investigator Monroe examined everything meticulously. She asked questions about dates, times, specific incidents. She was thorough but gentle, professional. When we concluded, she stated she believed us, but belief wasn't sufficient. She required more evidence to build a case. She inquired if we could persuade other victims to come forward. I told her about Lena, about the other girls who refused to speak. Investigator Monroe said she understood their fear, but their testimony would strengthen the case considerably. She provided us with her direct number and instructed us to call if we recalled anything else or if any new developments occurred. She also warned us to be careful. If Prescott suspected police involvement, he might attempt to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses. We left the station feeling both hopeful and terrified. Someone finally believed us, but now it was real. There would be an investigation, interrogations, perhaps a trial. Vanya's parents would discover the truth. The entire school would know. In the car, Ms. Celeste remarked that we were brave, that she was proud of us, but I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was going to be sick. Monday at school was peculiar. Prescott wasn't there. A substitute taught geometry. Rumors immediately circulated. Someone said he was ill. Someone else said he was attending a teaching conference, but Vanya and I knew better. The investigation had begun. At lunch, Director Hawthorne summoned us to his office. He looked furious. He asked if we had gone to the police. He asserted we should have come to him first, allowed him to handle it internally. Vanya laughed, actually laughed in his face. She said, "We attempted that, and you did nothing." Hawthorne claimed we didn't comprehend the damage we were inflicting. Prescott was a good man, a good teacher. These accusations would ruin him. Did we want that burden on our conscience? I found my voice and retorted, "What about the girls he harmed? What about their lives, their damage?" Hawthorne dismissed this as alleged, unproven. He maintained we were destroying a man's career based on rumors and misunderstandings. Then he uttered something that sent chills down my spine. He said we should be careful, that making false accusations carried consequences, legal consequences. Vanya stood up and declared we were finished. We had nothing further to say without legal counsel present. Hawthorne's face reddened, but he permitted us to leave. In the hallway, Vanya was trembling. She said Hawthorne had essentially threatened us. I agreed. We texted Investigator Monroe about the meeting. She advised us to document everything. Write down precisely what was said, save any emails or messages, build a comprehensive paper trail. The remainder of the week was chaotic. Prescott did not return. The substitute became permanent. Rumors ran wild. Someone claimed Prescott had been arrested. Someone else said he had fled the state. The truth was less dramatic. Investigator Monroe informed us he was on administrative leave, pending investigation, but the damage to his reputation had begun. Parents were asking questions. The school board was becoming involved. Then the backlash hit. Prescott's supporters emerged, aggressively defending him. A group of parents initiated a petition asserting he was being railroaded. They denounced Vanya and me as liars seeking attention. The digitally altered photos of Vanya resurfaced with new captions, accusing her of attempting to destroy a good man because he wouldn't sleep with her. It was brutal. Vanya missed 3 days of school. I began eating lunch in the library to avoid the cafeteria's hostile atmosphere. But then, something unexpected occurred. Bronte Miller came forward. She walked into the police station with her parents and provided a full statement about Prescott's inappropriate messages and behavior. Her parents had discovered the texts and believed her. Then, Lena Maxwell's parents contacted investigator Monroe. They stated their daughter had something to say. One by one, girls began to speak up. Not publicly, not at school, but to the police, to the investigators. Miss Celeste kept us updated. She said more teachers were also coming forward. Not with direct evidence, but with observations, concerns they had raised that were dismissed, patterns they had noticed. Mr. Rojas had documentation spanning 3 years regarding his concerns about Prescott's behavior with female students. Ms. Price possessed emails where Hawthorne had told her to mind her own business when she had raised red flags. The investigation expanded. It wasn't solely about Prescott anymore. It was about a system that shielded him, that silenced concerns, that prioritized reputation over student safety. Investigator Monroe interviewed dozens of individuals, current students, former students, teachers, administrators. The accounts were depressingly similar. Girls who were struggling, Prescott offering help, boundaries slowly eroding, and a school that deliberately looked the other way. The investigation consumed months, not weeks. There were depositions, evidence reviews, legal procedures that seemed to drag on indefinitely. Prescott remained on leave while lawyers fiercely contested every detail. The community remained divided, some demanding his punishment, others insisting on his innocence. Vanya and I continued attending school, confronting daily judgment from both factions. Some days were harder than others. The digitally altered photos continued to resurface despite multiple takedown attempts. New rumors spread weekly, but we had each other, and slowly, we had others too. Girls who had been silent began to offer subtle nods in the halls. Some even whispered, "Thank you," when no one was looking. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Prescott was apprehended. The charges were severe, multiple counts of inappropriate conduct with minors. The evidence was overwhelming. Not solely our testimony, but physical evidence discovered during the search of his residence. Photographs on his computer, disturbing mementos. The gradebooks with stars weren't just tracking academic progress, they were tracking conquests. The community erupted. Parents who had defended him were stunned. Others admitted they had always sensed something amiss. The school convened emergency meetings. They brought in counselors. They pledged full cooperation with the investigation. Hawthorne announced his early retirement, stating he wished to spend more time with family. Everyone knew the truth. He was escaping before he could be terminated. But the most satisfying outcome was what transpired with the students. The ones who had tormented Vanya began to back off. Some even offered apologies. Not many, but a few. The digitally altered photos disappeared. Blair Larson was suspended for 2 weeks when it was revealed he was among those who had created them. His football scholarship offers began to be withdrawn. It turns out, universities do not appreciate applicants who create explicit images of minors, even digitally generated ones. Vanya began to heal. She still endured difficult days, still contended with judgment from some individuals, but she also had support now. Other survivors who understood, teachers who believed her, even some parents who apologized for their prior blindness to the truth. She began discussing university again, about becoming a social worker to assist other girls like her, like us. The legal process was protracted. There were hearings and delays and motions. Prescott's lawyer attempted every stratagem to reduce or dismiss the charges, but the evidence was too compelling. Too many victims, too much documentation. Eventually, he accepted a plea deal. 15 years in prison, registration as an offender, never again permitted to teach. It wasn't enough for what he had done, but it was something. A form of justice. The school district also implemented changes, new policies regarding student-teacher interactions, mandatory reporting training, anonymous tip lines. They couldn't undo the damage, but they could strive to prevent its recurrence. Some asserted it was too little, too late. They were probably correct, but at least future students might be safer. I testified at one of the hearings, recounting that day behind the greenhouse, how Vanya had saved me, how many other girls she had tried to protect even when everyone reviled her. The prosecutor stated our evidence was crucial. The gradebooks, the photographs, the pattern we had documented. Without that, Prescott might have gone free. Vanya squeezed my hand when I finished testifying. We had achieved it together. Life eventually returned to a semblance of normalcy, as normal as it could be. Vanya graduated with honors, despite everything. She walked across that stage with her baby in the audience and her head held high. I had 2 more years of high school, but they were different, better. The culture had shifted. People were more aware, more careful, more willing to speak up. Ms. Celeste became our unofficial mentor. She assisted Vanya with university applications, helped me discern what I wished to pursue in life. She said we had displayed more courage than most adults she knew, that we had transformed things, likely saved lives. I wasn't certain about that. We simply did what felt right, what had to be done. Prescott's sentence made the local news. They didn't identify victims, but everyone knew. Vanya granted one interview, her voice anonymously disguised. She expressed hope that other girls would speak up, that they would be believed, that the adults entrusted with their protection would actually safeguard them. She said she was healing, moving forward, that her baby would grow up in a better world because people had finally listened. And that truly is the entire narrative. It was messy and painful and complicated. Nothing like the dramatic revelations one witnesses on television. Just two teenage girls who refused to allow a predator to continue harming people. Who discovered their voices when everyone attempted to silence them. Who learned that sometimes doing the right thing means everything deteriorates before it improves. But it does improve. Vanya is in university now, thriving. I am applying next year, contemplating criminal justice or social work, perhaps both. Oh, and those digitally altered photos. The creators incurred more than just school penalties. It turns out that creating and distributing explicit images of minors, even digitally generated ones, constitutes a federal crime. They are all performing community service and are on probation. Their university dreams are largely shattered. Good riddance, if you ask me. Prescott is in prison where he belongs. Hawthorne is gone. The school is safer. Not perfect, but significantly improved. And Vanya, she is the strongest person I know. Still kind, still helping others, still refusing to allow what transpired to define her. She says her baby saved her life, provided her a reason to fight, but I believe she saved herself, and perhaps saved a multitude of other girls too. That's all I have.